I want you to picture something, like, just for a second. Imagine you're walking down a street, right? But you're moving entirely against the current of this massive, dense crowd.
Oh, that sounds awful already.
Yeah, it's a nightmare scenario. Everywhere you look, people are pointing at you. And you can hear these overlapping, just suffocating whispers. They're mocking your choices, judging your mistakes, maybe even laughing at your ambitions.
Right, and your body reacts to that immediately.
Exactly. If you really sit with that image, put yourself right in the middle of that crowd, you can probably feel your chest tighten just a little bit. Your heart rate might even tick up. It is a deeply uncomfortable feeling.
Oh, for sure.
And in that moment, what you're essentially doing is taking the keys to your own happiness, your own biological state of calm, and you are just handing them over to a bunch of total strangers. So welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're exploring the philosophy and, the underlying psychology of the art of detachment.
It's such a crucial topic right now.
It really is. Our mission today is to unpack the modern epidemic of people-pleasing, that constant, exhausting fear of judgment, and figure out exactly how to take all of that paralyzing criticism and turn it into harmless white noise.
And that physical reaction you just described, the tightening chest, the spike in heart rate, that is actually the perfect place to start, because it reveals that people-pleasing isn't just like a quirky personality trait.
Right.
It is a deeply ingrained biological survival mechanism.
Right.
I mean, if we look at human evolutionary psychology, for tens of thousands of years, being judged negatively by the crowd literally meant exile.
And exile meant you were on your own against the elements.
Exactly. Exile from the tribe meant death. So your brain is wired to interpret social disapproval as a lethal threat.
Yeah.
That's why the cortisol just floods your system. We're terrified of the crowd's verdict because our ancient hardware thinks our lives depend on it.
Wow, so we're basically reacting to a bad tweet like it's a saber-toothed tiger.
That's exactly it. But the philosophical frameworks we are examining today, specifically the Stoic tradition, they challenge that primitive hardware at its very root. They point out this profound cognitive dissonance in how we operate. And it's captured brilliantly by Marcus Aurelius. He asked, why do we love ourselves more than others, but care more about their opinion than our own?
Okay, let's unpack this, because when you say it out loud, it sounds completely absurd.
It really does.
We are the main characters of our own lives, right? We live in our own heads 24/7. We know our own intentions, our own struggles, our own context better than anyone else ever could. Yet we are constantly letting the background extras write the script.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
I mean, we let people who barely know us, people who might only see a 10-second snapshot of our lives, dictate how we feel about ourselves when we wake up in the morning.
It is an absurdity, but it's also a nearly universal human glitch. We just outsource our self-worth. And to dismantle this, we really have to start by fundamentally shifting our focus. Like, before we can learn to ignore the crowd, we first need to understand the mechanics of why the crowd is criticizing us in the first place.
So we have to shift away from just feeling bad about ourselves.
Exactly. We have to move out of the defensive posture of fearing the judgment and, pivot into an analytical posture where we actually examine the judge.
Right, because the default reaction when we feel judged is to instantly look inward. Like, someone makes a snide comment and the immediate thought is, oh, what's wrong with me? What did I do? How do I fix myself to appease them?
Yeah.
We just assume the criticism is a perfectly accurate read of our character.
And that assumption is usually where the suffering begins. Psychologically speaking, another person's criticism rarely reflects who you actually are. It reflects who they are.
Wait, really? Always?
Almost always. It's the classic defense mechanism of projection. When someone throws an unprovoked insult at you or judges you harshly, what you are usually witnessing is an outward manifestation of their own internal instability.
So it's about their baggage, not yours.
Precisely. They are experiencing cognitive dissonance or pain regarding, say, their own insecurities, their own unfulfilled ambitions, or just their own bruised ego. And the human brain hates sitting with that kind of internal discomfort. So it offloads the pain by projecting it onto a convenient external target. You just happen to be in the crosshairs. Think of the visual metaphor of a broken mirror.
The broken mirror. I love this concept from the notes.
Yeah, it's powerful. Imagine that every piece of unwarranted criticism thrown your way is just a shard of a broken mirror. When you look into that shard, you aren't actually seeing a reflection of your own flaws. You are just seeing the critic's own angry, fractured face reflected back at you.
Wow.
The hostility has nothing to do with your objective reality. It is entirely about their turbulent internal state.
I hear that, But let me push back on this for a second. Because I know someone listening is probably thinking the exact same thing I was when I first encountered this idea.
Sure, go for it.
If we just adopt a blanket assumption that all criticism is nothing more than the critic's own psychological baggage, doesn't that make us immune to ever improving? I mean, it sounds like you're saying a hater is basically a funhouse mirror.
A funhouse mirror, yeah.
You wouldn't look at a warped funhouse mirror at a carnival and decide to go on a diet just because the curved glass made you look wide. You'd laugh at it. But in the real world, surely some mirrors are accurate, right? Like, if my boss tells me my work is sloppy, I can't just dismiss them as a broken mirror projecting their own trauma.
That is the crucial distinction to make. What's fascinating here is the philosophy isn't telling you to retreat into a delusion where you ignore facts, objective reality or valid feedback. It's telling you to recognize and filter out the emotional distortion of unwarranted criticism.
Okay, that makes sense.
The funhouse mirror analogy actually holds up perfectly here. If the mirror is warped by the critic's own anger, or jealousy, or maybe a need to exert control, the emotional reflection it gives you is completely useless for self-improvement. Let's take your example of the boss.
Yeah, the sloppy work comment.
Right. If your boss says, hey, there are 3 typos in this report, that is objective data. That's a flat mirror. You just fix the typos. But if your boss says, you are fundamentally incompetent and this report proves you'll never succeed, well, that second half is the funhouse mirror.
That's the projection.
Exactly. Understanding the difference between the factual data and the emotional payload is what brings immense peace of mind. You stop trying to fix your core identity based on someone else's distorted image.
Okay, so we separate the data from the distortion. We recognize that the emotional hostility is coming from their broken mirrors. But practically speaking, how do we handle it in the moment?
That's the hard part, right?
Yeah, because when that noise actually reaches our ears, when someone delivers a verbal jab right to our face, it still triggers that biological response we talked about. It still stings.
It does sting if you try to catch the punch. But if we look at the tactical application of Stoicism, there is a very specific method for handling this friction. Epictetus cultivated what is often referred to as an iron mindset, and his approach to direct insults is utterly brilliant.
I really like this part of the source text.
He argued that if someone speaks poorly of you, you should absolutely not defend yourself. Do not explain, do not justify, do not get angry. Instead, you smile and say, they must not know about my other flaws, otherwise they wouldn't have stopped at just those.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because that is not just a self-deprecating joke. That is a highly tactical psychological maneuver. It's essentially verbal judo.
Verbal judo is the perfect term for it.
Think about the mechanics of an insult. When someone insults you, they are throwing a punch, and they are expecting resistance. Our biological instinct is to put up a rigid, heavy shield to block it. We want to argue back to explain why they are factually wrong.
Of course we do. Our ego demands it.
Right. But by putting up a shield, you actually legitimize the attack. Epictetus is saying, don't block the punch, just step totally aside, agree with them, amplify the insult, and use their own momentum to let them fall completely flat on their face.
The psychology of the argument completely collapses when you do that.
Right.
By not resisting or defending, you completely neutralize the attack. Because the critic is looking for a specific dopamine payoff. They want a reaction.
They want to see you bleed a little bit.
Yes. They want to see that their shard of glass cut you, because your pain temporarily distracts them from their own. When you respond with that kind of untouchable humor, you break the expected social script. You deprive them of the satisfaction, and more importantly, you protect your own peace.
You show them you're bulletproof.
You demonstrate that their words have zero structural impact on your reality. This is the ultimate power of an iron mind. But to execute this without just becoming a punching bag, you need a robust internal mechanism. You need a social filtration system.
A social filter.
Yeah.
Like a reverse osmosis water purifier, but for human interaction.
Exactly that. The disciplined mind listens with reason, not with its ears, and certainly not with its ego. You have to actively run the input you receive through this filter and separate it into 2 distinct categories.
And the first category is the flat mirror.
Yes, sincere feedback. This is the objective data we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
Now, it might not be fun to hear, it might bruise the ego, but it acts as bitter medicine. It cures a flaw, it makes you more competent.
Right, it's useful.
But the second category is mere insults. The emotional projections, the hostility from the broken mirror, that is just garbage.
So the rule of thumb is if it doesn't help you get better, it literally does not exist. You extract the bitter medicine and you let the murky water run clear right through your hands. You don't try to hold onto the beet to examine it or argue with it. You just let it pass through the system.
To take the cure and discard the poison. But as effective as that is for direct confrontation, we do have to acknowledge a different layer of the people-pleasing epidemic.
The ambient anxiety.
Exactly. It's one thing to filter out direct spoken insults. It's quite another to deal with the broader ambient anxiety of simply feeling watched and judged by society at large. I mean, most of the time, nobody is actually yelling at us.
Right, it's just in our head.
Instead, we are dealing with that silent, oppressive feeling that everyone is constantly evaluating our every move, our clothes, our career choices, our social media posts.
The silent judgment. That feeling that you are constantly on stage performing for this hypercritical audience. Which brings up what I think is the most liberating, albeit slightly harsh, psychological truth we can internalize. And the truth is this: no one cares about you as much as you think they do.
It's a profound relief once the ego finally accepts it. People are far too preoccupied with their own lives, their own failures, and their own deep-seated fears to obsess over yours. In psychology, this is known as the spotlight effect. We chronically overestimate how much other people notice our actions or our flaws.
And there's a really powerful metaphor for this in the notes, the spectator effect, or the empty theater.
Paint that picture for us, because the visual of the theater is what makes the psychology click.
Oh, sure. So imagine you are standing all alone on a massive theater stage. The spotlight is glaring down on you, you're sweating, and you are absolutely terrified of the audience's judgment. You're obsessing over every word you say, analyzing every slight movement of your hands, totally paralyzed by the thought of the critics sitting out there in the dark judging your performance.
It's exhausting just thinking about it.
Right. And then finally, you field your eyes from the glare of the spotlight, you look out into the auditorium, and you realize all the seats are completely empty. Everyone else is on their own stage, caught in their own spotlight, terrified of their own imaginary audience.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it reveals a fascinating trick that the human ego plays on us. This intense fear of societal judgment is actually rooted in a very subtle form of narcissism.
Narcissism? Really?
Yes, it is the false, ego-driven belief that everyone is constantly watching us, that we are the center of everyone else's universe as well as our own. Recognizing that the theater is empty isn't an insult to your importance. It is the key to your psychological freedom. The ego wants to believe people care enough to judge you. Dropping the ego means accepting the beautiful indifference of the universe.
That's wild. We imprison ourselves for an audience that isn't even looking at the stage. It reminds me of someone walking around wearing an incredibly heavy suit of medieval armor.
Oh, that's a good comparison.
Like, we're sweating, we're exhausted, our joints are aching because we're constantly bracing ourselves, trying to protect against all these incoming arrows of judgment. But we are standing in an empty room. There are no archers. The armor is just exhausting us for absolutely no reason.
And I think that's especially relevant now with the modern social media panopticon. We carry around a device that literally quantifies human attention with likes and views.
Oh yeah, the metrics just make it worse.
It artificially inflates that subtle narcissism, making us feel like the whole world is refreshing their feeds, just waiting to judge our next move, when in reality they're just scrolling past on the way to their own dopamine hit.
That artificial amplification makes the empty theater realization even more critical today. Social media creates the illusion of a packed auditorium, but it's just a digital projection. The seats are still fundamentally empty. Okay, so realizing the theater is empty, recognizing the broken mirrors, understanding the spotlight effect, I mean, this is all fantastic on a logical, cognitive level, but let's get really practical here. How do we stop the visceral, physical reaction?
The biology of it.
Right, because logic is great in a vacuum, but when someone does manage to say something genuinely hurtful, or when that ambient anxiety flares up in a social setting, the amygdala still fires, the chest still tightens. We need a tactical tool to handle the biological response. We need to bridge the gap between knowing the philosophy and actually living it.
The bridge between the philosophy and the biology is a concept called selective apathy. Now, it's vital to clarify what this actually means because it's so often misunderstood. Selective apathy does not mean becoming a cold, unfeeling, emotionless robot.
Because that's impossible anyway.
Right, you are still a biological organism. You are going to feel the sting of an insult or the sudden flush of embarrassment. The cortisol will release. Selective apathy means experiencing that physiological emotion, acknowledging it, but flatly refusing to let it dictate your actions or your self-worth. It is the separation of feeling from doing.
It's the ability to walk calmly through a wall of fire because you know the fire is just a digital hologram.
Exactly.
You see the flames, your body might instinctively flinch from the visual, but your rational mind knows it can't actually burn your flesh, so you just keep walking forward.
A perfect visualization. The flames are real to your eyes, but not to your reality.
Yeah.
And the tactical mechanism to achieve this state, to pause the biological freakout long enough for the rational mind to take over, is the 3-second rule.
The 3-second rule, how does that work?
When someone insults you or you feel that massive wave of societal judgment, you must force yourself to take a literal 3-second pause before reacting. Do not speak, do not defend, just pause.
1, 2, 3.
In those 3 seconds, you are allowing the processing of the event to move from the amygdala, the primitive, fearful part of your brain, into the prefrontal cortex, the center of logic and reason. You use those seconds to mentally categorize the incoming data.
So you're talking to yourself in those 3 seconds?
Yes. You tell yourself, this is external. This is a reflection from their broken mirror. This is an empty theater. It cannot touch my soul. It cannot alter my value unless I explicitly grant it permission to do so.
So what does this all mean in our day-to-day lives? In practice, it's basically a mental firewall.
A firewall, yeah.
Think about how a computer operating system works. When it intercepts a sketchy file or a weird executable program you just downloaded, it doesn't just automatically run it and destroy the hard drive. It pauses. A little window pops up on the screen and asks, "Are you sure you want to open this? This looks dangerous." It's from an unverified publisher.
It gives you a choice.
Exactly. You have those few seconds to look at it, recognize it as malware, and hit delete before the virus actually infects your system. That 3-second rule is your brain's pop-up window. It gives you the chance to hit delete on someone else's projected garbage before it infects your core self-worth.
That firewall analogy perfectly captures the mechanics of cognitive behavioral filtering. You intercept the data packet, you evaluate its origin and intent with reason, and you quarantine or discard the malicious code. And this brings us to the ultimate synthesis of everything we've explored today.
The big takeaway.
Yes. If you can master this architecture, if you can recognize the projection of the broken mirror, utilize the epictetus deflection to neutralize attacks, accept the profound freedom of the empty theater, and consistently enforce your 3-second mental firewall, what is the final result? How do you actually deal with the persistent critics, the people who actively root against you and want to see you fail?
The ultimate answer is you don't. You just don't explain yourself to them. You don't get down in the mud and argue with them. You just go out and live an incredibly good life.
The best revenge is not to be like your enemy.
Exactly. Because living well, being truly happy, fulfilled, and entirely detached from their noise is the cruelest and most effective response to anyone who wants to pull you down. Your success and your peace of mind are the ultimate refutations of their criticism.
There is a beautiful, enduring metaphor that solidifies this final mindset. Think of the opinions of others, the judgments of the crowd, the whispers and the critiques. Think of them as clouds. And think of yourself, your core identity and value, as the sun.
Clouds in the sun.
Right. Clouds are constantly moving. They might drift in. They might obscure the light for a brief moment. They might make the sky look a little gloomy and gray. But clouds are transient. They are just water vapor and shifting air currents. They have no mass, no permanence. They are never the sun itself.
Because they can't be.
Right. You are the sun. You have your own gravity, your own internal energy source, and you illuminate your own path regardless of the weather passing beneath you.
I love the mechanics of that metaphor. The clouds can't actually touch the sun. They just pass by in the lower atmosphere, while the sun remains exactly where it is, burning just as bright.
Exactly.
So to everyone listening to this right now, driving in your car or going for a run or sitting at your desk, your opinion of yourself is the only one that truly holds any weight. You have to drop the exhausting burden of the crowd's expectations. Take off that heavy medieval armor because you are standing in an empty room.
It's time to claim your psychological freedom.
Run the malware through the firewall and turn those suffocating whispers into harmless white noise.
And that tight chest you feel when you imagine walking against the crowd, that physiological panic, it only happens because you are holding your breath, bracing for an impact that isn't actually real. You are waiting for an empty theater to applaud. Exhale. Let it go. The opinions of strangers cannot alter your reality.
But I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to mull over on your own as we wrap up. It builds on everything we've unpacked today, and it's kind of the hidden catch to this entire philosophy.
Oh, this is the scary part.
It is. Let's say you do it. You put in the work, you successfully apply this art of detachment. You build your mental firewall, you completely block out the noisy, critical opinions of the crowd, and you finally find yourself standing on that stage in total, unbothered peace. Are you prepared for what happens next?
Because it gets very quiet.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because once the theater is completely empty and the room is finally truly quiet, the only voice left to listen to is your own true desires. And figuring out what you actually want out of this life without the comforting distraction of the crowd telling you what to do, well, that might just be the most terrifying and thrilling voice of all.